And even though I had no reason to suspect I might be treated that way, I was always prepared to be treated that way. And even though you believe that New York must have been better than the South, there were pockets of New York that were just as bad.
Absolutely.
And I had no idea where they were,
Right.
or had no reason, no way to anticipate where they might be other than unless I had experience
Right.
with the institution. So yes, I brought those attitudes with me. I brought the potential expectations in order to be prepared on how I'm going to deal with it.
Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Going back 20 years, excuse me. It's the last time I can remember the country being uniformly together in support of everybody. And it was because we had a common, for lack of a better term, we had a common enemy.
Yeah. Even though
And
we
that-
didn't know who it was until we
Correct.
talked.
Correct. It's the good versus evil type thing. And of course, from the other side, on the side of Al Qaeda, we were the enemy and we were evil.
Yeah.
So, which is how many of these battles get started from that standpoint. And for a while, the uniform common enemy thing kept people together, and it kept us supporting one another through really difficult times in the New York metro area, in areas around the Pentagon, et cetera. We all had a common faith in the good, quote unquote, that America stood for. And we helped the families of those who were victims, the families of those who were injured, the families of the first responders, et cetera. And it lasted for a little while, probably until the next election.
I'm not sure it lasts that long. I remember it a little differently. The city of New York was a crucible.
Yes.
So your description of New York is probably accurate. I don't know. I'm not from New York, and I didn't visit New York. Doris and I dressing up to go to this fancy restaurant at the top of the towers, and I remember looking at the menu and not seeing any prices. And I remember being scared to death that we were going to order something over our budget. Would have been on a credit card, but I really didn't feel like busting our account. I remember us discussing what we were going to order with that thought in mind. How, what's the cheapest thing here on the menu, or how high can we go? And we were too embarrassed to ask. We were new at it, and we didn't want it to seem as if we didn't belong there. Surprised, as Black Southerners, we were even allowed in.
Really?
Yeah, I say surprised, somewhat surprised, because when I say not allowed in, I guess what I should say was we were surprised that nobody seemed to notice that we were in. At that point, we weren't being denied access, but we were definitely scrutinized closely if we ended up going to restaurants that we normally didn't. When I say we, our culture normally didn't visit, or it was clear that it was pre-integration, they didn't want us.
So had you ever been to New York City prior to that trip?
Maybe once or twice as a child. I'm pretty sure I did. Doris had never been there.
So you had the concerns that you had experienced in the South, you carried with you to New York.
Yes.
Not recognizing or understanding that there might be a different level of acceptance.
Yes. And let me see if I can explain this. Intellectually, I knew that the environment of welcome might be different. Politically, I was aware that it didn't matter where I was in the United States. I had the right to go in any place.
Right.
But socially, personally, when I say you can't legislate hearts,
Right.
that probably applies more appropriately in this type of scenario. In 1963 or 64, when businesses that dealt with the public were forced to integrate to serve everyone, the day Lyndon Johnson signed that bill did not mean that the next day J.C. Penney's opened its door to me,
Right.
or that the most elite restaurant in Jackson welcomed me. It does mean that the next day I had the right to walk in and pay for a meal, but it didn't stop them from looking at me funny. It didn't stop them from even trying to bar me if they wanted, if they hadn't heard. It didn't stop them from staring at me or doubling the price I might pay, or spitting in my food, or delaying the delivery of my food. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I brought with me to New York.
Got it.
And even though I had no reason to suspect I might be treated that way, I was always prepared to be treated that way. And even though you believe that New York must have been better than the South, there were pockets of New York that were just as bad.
Absolutely.
And I had no idea where they were,
Right.
or had no reason, no way to anticipate where they might be, other than unless I had experience
Right.
with the institution. So yes, I brought those attitudes with me. I brought the potential expectations in order to be prepared on how I'm going to deal with it if it happens. And again, most of the trepidation, we enjoyed our meal. I don't remember what we got. I know we didn't get lobster, but we enjoyed we enjoyed our experience, and being at, and being at the top of the towers, and looking out on New York, and being above the canyons of buildings and stuff. All that was still special to us, but so there was some initial anxiety. But then there was initial anxiety taking the elevator all the way up to the top too.
Yeah.
And then realizing if something happened down below, we're trapped. You think about those things your first time in a high rise like that.
Absolutely. It's different from walking to the first floor to the second floor in your home in Jackson or Starkville or wherever, to getting in and taking an elevator that goes to the 104th floor in 3 minutes.
Right.
So and you look down and you said, I'm not going to make it if you fall. So you've been to New York since, I assume, since the
Yes,
windows. Okay.
but I haven't been to the to the
To
monument,
Memorial.
to the memorial.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's pretty. It you'll get a you'll get uh,
Yeah,
you'll get that feeling in your throat when you go there.
I'm sure.
It's to me almost like the Holocaust museums in many ways. When you go to New York now, do you still have some of the same angst that you had when you went 25, 28 years ago, 30 years ago, or are
Well,
you much?
once again, New York isn't on my list. I for some reason I don't go to New York a lot.
Okay.
I just don't. But to answer your question, when I go anywhere, I don't bring this with me anymore. I have shed that conditioning, if you will,
Right.
and I have adopted my right to be to go wherever I want to go, and I'm prepared to defend it should I have to. And I don't feel that I have to be prepared for a potential fight every time I walk into a place of establishment that seems to be a little more expensive than my budget, whatever that might be. I still go places sometimes, like the hotel that you recommended for me.
Well, I didn't know that, and if I had known that it was $900 a night, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't. I wouldn't have selected it. So I took Sharon to Japan, when I was speaking there a couple of years ago. And pretty much the only way I can get her to go is to tell her we were going to go to Tokyo Disney. And there's a Disneyland hotel right at the entrance, of Tokyo Disney. So I said, and I'll get us a room there. So I booked 3 or 4 nights because there's a number of parks in the Disney group in Tokyo. And, we got a room that looked right over the entrance to the parks. It was on almost a corner turret type area, rounded room, 180 degrees of windows. And, I booked the room. I calculated the room rate to be reasonable based upon the exchange rate that I had in my mind. And then we checked out, and I did the calculation using the same exchange rate that I had in my mind. And then I got the credit card bill, which had the correct exchange rate, which I had no clue about.
Oh my goodness.
Somehow I bollocksed up the exchange rate, and we had one of the most expensive rooms in the hotel. And I couldn't understand why we were getting so much really personal attention when we were checking in. I mean, like they brought you to a private room to check in.
When you say you wanted the most expensive rooms, you actually wanted or you ordered?
I ordered a room. Okay. It ended up being one of the most expensive rooms in the hotel.
Wow.
To say that it was slightly above Casa del Mar, but I didn't know that until afterwards. Sharon will never recover from how great a trip she had, and I will never recover from not knowing how to correctly do exchange rates. So bottom line is, I thought you warranted a hotel of the quality of the Casa del Mar, but I had no clue. It's almost like going to the Windows on the World and getting a menu without the prices on it.
Right. Same thing. Exact same thing.
Yeah, I took Sharon out for dinner in San Diego, one place, and they gave me the menu with the prices and Sharon the menu without the prices, which is what they've done in historically in many restaurants when men were considered the only source for income. And she said, there's no prices on this. I said, yeah, it's just something that they do in these types of restaurants. And it's like, and I said, well, I don't know what to order. I said, you're a vegetarian. You just took 98% of the menu off anyhow. So,
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.